Yes, people, I'm Alam, and this is Toronto Hoop Talk. I'm back with another stream for you guys today. And right off the bat, I have a guest with me. But before we get into that, basic admin stuff, if you're here, make sure you're smashing the like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you're watching this back on the replay, you're just as appreciated, but you have the same opportunity to help make the channel grow. Make sure you're pressing the like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, leaving comments. All that engagement helps YouTube figure to push this content to the larger YouTube audience. So, with your help, we can make this channel grow. Make sure while you're here, you're supporting all the people I work with. So I have guys at Kenyon with me. I have people from Sarcasm City with me. They all have their own channels. Make sure you're supporting them as well. Got my guy Joe Wayne in here, legend from our last Summer League watch along. I have Kenyon with me who will join the stream as he gets ready. Oh, he's there. He's ready to go. What's going on, Kenyon?
Yeah, sorry, I was doing I'm studying basically, so
Yeah, busy man,
I
busy
literally
man.
have like questions. I'm like writing up.
Hey,
How's it going,
I
man?
respect the hustle. It's all good. It's all good. Looking forward to getting into things. I like the hoodie, by the way.
Thank you. It's warm in this cold basement. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, h- how are you
Right.
doing, man?
All good. I'm a little bit tired of the redundancy of the discussions that are happening with our team.
I thought you were gonna
So,
say the roster, but that too.
oh, yeah, and or the
I'm just
organization, you
teasing.
could say as a whole, to be honest.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, you watch the summer league team and you have some of the same pain that a lot of us have experienced watching the regular season team. I don't know. Did you watch the summer league games?
I didn't watch the full of the last one. I was kind of switching between a couple other games and a couple other, but I did watch enough of it. So I watched the first half. You tell me your thoughts first.
The first thoughts are just that the team isn't good. It's frustrating, but yeah, like you watch our team play, you watch other teams play, you see a pretty marked difference in terms of shot making. You see a pretty marked difference in terms of creating shots. It's not just that we don't hit our shots when we get them, it's that we don't make shots at a particularly high rate. If the ball isn't in Marquise Noel's hands, I'm not sure that the right decisions are going to be made consistently. And if the ball
Yep.
isn't leaving Noel or Grady's hands, I don't particularly feel great about it going in. Um, and if Moses Brown isn't on the court, I don't feel great about rebounds getting got. Like, and that's just like a basic thing, right? I'm only mentioning one or two guys in all these scenarios. So yeah, just there's I don't really understand what the vision is. I don't understand the upside with some of these guys. We have a few 25-year-olds on the team that I don't think warrant much more of an opportunity, but we kind of have to give them two more games at this point. So yeah, it's definitely lacking the luster that summer leagues had before. I remember being excited to watch Jonas Valanciunas in summer league. I remember being excited to watch Scotty Barnes, and these aren't even like earth-shattering prospects, but it was just at least enjoyable to watch a team take a court to play basketball. But that's definitely not the same anymore, and that's not an indictment against Grady, but I think it's an indictment against just um the history, the recent history that we've built in this organization, and kind of just in a small way, it's feeling like it's going to continue.
That's fair. I think so. Here's my thoughts. The other team clearly scouted for Noel, so that was clear. Because
Yeah,
they really hedged up and blitzed him a lot, and I think he's still trying to learn how to operate pick and roll when he's being blitzed and under that type of pressure. I think this is why I was saying, like, hold on, people. He may not be ready for big time yet. I mean, there
yeah,
is a pathway for him to get minutes, but let's pump the brakes on it first because there's still a lot for these guys to learn. I mean,
yeah,
it's like summer league is one thing. Um, but then there's like the actual league, right? Like this is kind of like a litmus test. And I'm not saying that he's not gonna have any sort of shot. I'm not trying to diss him or anything like that. But yeah, the other thing I'll say is, can you imagine how much worse this would look without him?
oh, it'd be bad. It'd be bad. It would be a lot like it would be kind of like last year. Although last year we had Jeff Dowden, but when he wasn't on the court, and Delano Banton wasn't making shots, it was a similar kind of a mess. But then also you could say, hey, common theme amongst the Raptors all of last season. And I'm not too up to date with the 905, but I think you've mentioned lack of like the trend of not having good point guard play extended to the 905. I believe you mentioned that at some point, or
Yeah, I did. The other thing too is that, and maybe this has to do with coaching, right? Like they
yeah,
got a coach last year, I believe it was last year for Eric Corey, who had no coaching experience before.
yep,
He was a PhD
yep,
guy. I'm not trying to diss the dude, but he had no coaching experience. And maybe he can grow into that. But when you go from Patrick Mutombo to someone with no experience, and then I would assume that or wait, is he the coach? Yeah, he's the coach.
yeah, he is.
I can't remember who's the GM of the 905 specifically anymore. I've lost track. But my point is that I'm wondering how they're selecting these guys and how they're planning on retaining these guys. Like you said, there's guys on the. I mean, we selected guys on the summer league team that I'm like haven't we seen enough of this guy? And then yet there's other guys where we got them and I haven't seen them at all. There's guys that didn't
Yeah.
play last game. Like this is summer league. This isn't. We're not trying to win anything really. Like
Oh yeah.
it's summer league. What are we doing?
Mhm. I don't
So
I don't
yeah,
understand why David Johnson got minutes. Frankly,
David Johnson it was drafted at the same time as Banton. Okay, he is now
yep.
coming off the bench in a summer league game.
Mhm.
I could just tell based on your reaction, you know, how down bad we are.
Oh, yeah. So there was a moment in the third quarter of the last summer league game where I think the Raptors were down like 18. And David Johnson just is none the wiser to a back cut. And it looks like his feet are, in concrete as a guy just like casually strolls by him. And it was really frustrating to watch because I haven't particularly seen anything from David Johnson on the ball. So I'd assume off the ball, he's trying his hardest. And like,
Do you know
there's
who's
really
hooping
no
right now?
who's hooping.
Do you want to know who's hooping right now? I believe Gabe Brown for the Suns. How does that feel?
Oh, wait, was he on the 905 at some point?
I mean, he was in our system at some point, right? Because he at least
Yeah,
made it at the very least to training camp. We didn't sign him. We didn't
yeah,
do it. Like this is my point. This is part of that development pipeline. And if I'm
yeah.
not mistaken, if I go right now, if I go to NBA.com, I'm fairly certain because someone just messaged me about it not that long ago that Gabe Brown is literally hooping for the Suns. Well, and it's like we couldn't
Yep.
have given him a two-way.
I think he got a 10-day and that was it. I have to refresh my memory.
We didn't
But
sign him last year. You want to know why? Because we had Bo Cruz.
we had an actor. We had an actor. Got it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking him up right now. Gabe Brown.
4 for 6
Uh
right now, 1 of 3, and plus minus of 10.
it says he was on the 905 last year. So that's where
Even
the
worse. Even worse.
yeah.
So he couldn't have gotten a shout.
Oh
Like
man.
I don't
Let
mean
me
to.
let me see his stats. Let me see his stats from the 905 last year. Well, he played 4 games, but that's still a stint. Like that's enough to know what you have there. And obviously having Gabe Brown isn't like for the people watching, having Gabe Brown isn't the difference between us being like a 3 seed and
No,
us being where we are. But the point is like an accumulation of getting the evaluation wrong over and over and over and over and over again puts you in the kind of position that we're in right now. So it's not like if next year we get the Gabe Brown thing right, that magically everything gets fixed. But if you can make the right evaluation when it comes to making these kind of decisions over and over and over again, you put yourself in better situations, right? You give yourself more options and you give yourself some wiggle room when it comes to like making mistakes. You can afford like everyone's inevitably gonna make mistakes, but when you tend to get things right, the mistakes are okay. When you tend to get things wrong and the mistakes compound, then the kind of like the mistakes that are just chalked up to bad luck, they come across as even worse. So, um,
You
let's say we made the wrong choice with the rookies that we got into the team this year. Not to say that that's the case. There's nothing wrong
yes.
with that. But if it's off the back of just a bunch of mistakes over and over again, it makes the individual ones seem worse. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you another example, right? I believe Tarquavian Smith, he wanted to actually be here. He put it on his Instagram. I believe he signed unsigned, undrafted with the Sixers, right? If you've watched his summer league, like that dude can hoop. Again, I'm not trying to like, and maybe you're more interested in talking about the Siakam rumors. I don't know, right? But I'm just like, this to me is more interesting because I'm like, there's like a why kind of a thing. Like,
So hold on. I just want to know if it's me. If someone in the chat can let me know, is there some static coming from Kenyon's mic, or is that just me? Because it just.
1 second, let me just
All right,
try.
no problem. But yeah, with regards to what we're talking about now, to be honest, I don't mind talking about this at all. GS400 says yes, so there must have been it must have been not just on my end. But yeah, so the thing is like I did 2 watch-alongs for both the games that were played. Like I am fairly invested in what's going on, and I have
Is this better?
it. Oh yeah, it's good now. It's good now. But yeah, I have an investment in what's going on because, like I said, I've noticed a pattern of bad decisions and poor evaluations on players, and I'd like to be hopeful about things turning around. So I'm looking at these G League games, or sorry, these summer league games to get some type of inspiration, right? Some type of hey, things are going to be better. Things aren't, it's not going to be a continuation of what's happened. Oh, look at our new draft pick. Look at our new two-way player. Look at our new coaching staff even, and just obviously summer league isn't like a grand showcase that lets us know who everybody is and what their skill sets are. But it would just be nice to see something different, and then to watch those 2 games and for it to just feel like Raptors basketball all over again. It was like, well, this kind of sucks. Um, and yeah, it's just even the manner of how things work. Like in the first game, I remember things looked decent for about 5 minutes, and then Moses Brown left the court, a 7'2", like 240 center, left the court for a 6'8", 225 center. Um, and just we had no presence underneath the rim. And I was like, oh yeah, that's what it was like to not have a center on the court. I remember what that felt like. And here I am feeling it again in Summer League. And then in the second game, it was just a matter of not making any shots whatsoever. And this came up during the watch along, but Marquise Noel is so good at creating for others that it makes the shooters look worse because he's creating wide open three after wide open three after wide open three for guys, and they're clanking them. If he's not creating these looks for people, maybe they get a pass. Maybe they kind of they don't get noticed as much. But that was not the case for a lot of our shooters. Um, Ron Harper Jr., Joe Wieskamp, a lot of these guys that we're familiar with because they've been in our system and they're the ones that are a part of our system and get the continual looks, they're missing their shots. Marquise Noel himself was missing shots, I believe, but that, like, for a guy who made his shots last game, it is what it is. I'm okay with it. But yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say for Marquise Noel, that's okay. Like I
Yeah,
think you could tell that his confidence got shaken with the shot stuff. Um, Now we've talked really negatively, and I'll just give like a couple counterpoints now. Um, what I've seen from Grady, and I'm fine with Marquise. It's just like he's just not ready
yeah,
for prime time. That's fine. What I've seen from Grady is really good. I think there's a couple times when he probably could have had 7 assists yesterday, or what was it, 2 days ago or whatever. It was
yeah,
yesterday, I think.
yeah.
It was just guys missing. Like he knows what to do with the ball. He has a nose for the ball. He repositions and relocates himself on the 3-point line pretty well. He attacks closeouts pretty well. His defense has been decent, right? Like he hasn't been getting blown by a whole ton. His
He hasn't
hands
been
are
taking fouls.
he hasn't been taking fouls. His hands are disruptive. You can tell when he shoots the ball and he misses, it doesn't shake his confidence, which is very
Yeah,
important. It's just right now he's not at a level where he can really like he can self-create a little bit, like he can create his own shot a little bit, but
yeah,
like not, he's not Keontae George, right? Like it's
yeah.
just like, which
He's
is fine.
not. Yeah,
And they're two
which we
different,
knew.
yeah, they're different types of players, right? And
Yeah,
and that's not to say that you don't need a Grady on your team. Like I think he's going to be really better than what people say, but I just think also it's, if you're going into a summer league with really one point guard, let's say, for better or for worse, these are the type of results that you'll see. It could be worse. Like the Charlotte, if you watch any of the Charlotte games, it's nasty. Like that's nasty basketball. That's not fun to watch. It's so disorganized. I will say I know it's too early to really come down too hard on a guy that just got drafted, but Nick
Brandon
Smith
Miller.
has not shown. Oh, no, it's Nick Smith.
Okay,
Nick
Nick Smith.
Smith
Sorry.
hasn't shown me anything different than what I thought. Like he
Yeah.
still settles a lot, and does not go into contact. Does not do the thing. If you disagree, let me know. Like I want to hear what
I haven't watched the Charlotte games whatsoever, so
you don't have to.
I'm unfamiliar. But yeah. So my thing with Charlotte is I heard some of the negative stuff. I heard some of it pointed towards Brandon Miller. I hadn't heard about the Nick Smith stuff yet, but I'm not surprised considering that their owner is on his way out. But he said, "Hey, on my way out, I'm gonna make the
I'm
draft
gonna do you a
decisions."
solid.
Yes, as the guy who's continually messed it up for a good 15 years or so, I'm gonna do it one last time. You know, on my way out, I'm gonna do it one last time. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
not surprised
mean,
at all.
Brandon Miller, I think is fine. He's shown pop and stuff like that. I think you know it's he also, although he has said, it seems like every single person that comes out of like college these days says that they're a point guard.
Yeah, yeah,
Apparently,
yeah, yeah,
and he is no stranger to that. So to me, I think he's not a point guard. He does, he's another guy where it's like you need right now to have someone else create for them. And Nick Smith is just not a point guard either. We saw that throughout his college season. So, but yeah, I mean, there's positive things to look at with summer league. It's just disappointing. And my main thing is I'll always go back. Joe Wieskamp has not shown anything at all, and yet we had the money to keep Banton,
yeah,
and Banton could be used on the summer league team for sure.
yeah. Yeah, it's frustrating, and to kind of comment on something you said about Grady, something I made a point to highlight during the watch alongs was something to keep in mind with Grady is that his skill set isn't about initiating his own offense. It's not about creating these crazy looks for himself, right? So in the summer league context where he's the best player on the court and you kind of just tend to expect your best player is going to show up and create a bunch for himself and take a bunch of shots, high volume, high usage, and get buckets. It's not really what's going to happen with him. And even if it were to happen, in a way, what you gain from that is not particularly useful when thinking about what he's going to look like in the NBA, because that's not going to be his role in the NBA. So you kind of have to understand that he has to take a bit of a back seat to some of the guys on the team just by virtue of the fact that that's his role. And if he tries to press too hard, it'll probably look bad. And in the first game, there were moments where he was trying to press too hard. And it's not like he made a fool of himself or anything. Just adverse things would happen. He would try to dribble past somebody and he wouldn't make it, right? He'd get to the rim and get blocked. Or he would kind of lose his handle, or like stuff like that, right? Second game, he settled down a bit and he channeled his aggression a little bit more to his shooting as opposed to doing things that aren't really in his game. And he shot it, I feel like, every chance he felt like he could. And I wasn't upset with it. To talk about what you said in terms of him not losing his confidence, in the first game, he got a steal and it was a 2-on-1 and he just pulled up from three, completely missed it. Got the ball back the next possession, hit a corner three. Had another instance in the second game where he missed a three. His teammate got the rebound, kicked it back out to him. He made the three. You like to see that your shooter just forgets about the last shot as soon as it's happened. So again, for what the role Grady's going to have in the NBA, he showed some encouraging things, right? It's just unfortunate that summer league is the kind of setting where if he's your best player on your team, he's not positioned to like flourish in a way that typically we look for great basketball talents to flourish. So I didn't look at that as a particularly bad thing. And all my negative things I had to say about the summer league team, none of it was about Grady. I'm even like happy with Marquise. And I mean, to be honest, I don't even particularly look at some of the other talents because it's not really their fault. A lot of these guys, if you I did a little snippet from one of our lives where I was talking about the summer league squad and I was like, hey, don't know a lot about these guys. Why? Because if I look at their histories, they've been playing in Europe for the last 3, 4 years, right? So these are guys that have already had to go to Europe because they got a look and it didn't pan out for them. And this is like their second chance. And there's some success stories when it comes to players like that. You do get your Patrick Beverleys and your PJ Tuckers, but even just listen to the names that I just said, right? Like the the chance the times where that works are very few and far between. And even when it does work, you're not talking about great players anyways. You're talking about these like fringe role players. So um I kind of felt like this was going to happen, and then it did to the highest degree. Again, like I tentatively have the watch along scheduled for the next couple games, but I don't know if I'm gonna.
Well, you're not looking forward to it.
No. So here's the thing. In this
It's like a
game,
chore for you.
the chat. No, this last game, the chat got us through the second half. So this guy, Joe Wayne, are you familiar with the player in this picture?
It looks like is that Imani Bates or who
No,
is this?
that's Craig Porter Jr. So
Greg Borgia?
Craig
Oh,
Porter
yes, yes,
Jr.,
yes.
random player on the Cavs who I did not know before the game. He starts hooping, and actually Aiden on the stream was like, "Oh, Craig Porter Jr. I don't know who that guy is, but he seems pretty good." And then this guy shows up. He's like, "Hi guys, can I watch this game for free?" I said, "I don't think so." He's like, "Well, I grew up with Craig Porter Jr. and I'm trying to see how he's doing in this game. I don't know where to watch this game." I was like, "We'll just tune in and we'll keep you updated." So he's our Terre Haute, Indiana correspondent. He knows Craig Porter Jr.'s mom. He's going to keep us tapped in with his career. If he ever pops off, if he ever joins the Raptors, he told us he'll secure us the Craig Porter Jr. interview. Well, these are the type of shenanigans we had to get through. You're muted, by the way. These are the type of
Oh.
shenanigans we had to get through that game.
Well, I was just saying, shout out to this guy, but also to Greg Porter Jr.
100%, 100%. Good people. Interview coming soon. Um, but yeah, this is what we needed to do to get through the games. The basketball wasn't it for sure, and just the David Johnson back cut happened, and I was spiritually broken. But um, we'll just have
Well,
to see. We'll just have to
I,
get through it. We'll have to see what happens in October.
yeah, I'll say one other thing, and then I know you really wanted to talk about the Siakam thing, so we could talk about that too. But I guess my point is this: Grady is kind of a ceiling raiser to me. So there's guys that are floor raisers, there's guys that are ceiling raisers. I think Grady is more of a ceiling raiser than a floor raiser. And again, when you're looking at a summer league team, right? Like it goes exactly to what we were talking about, right? Because it's like you need a guy like Noel to be able to raise the floor in terms of being able to at least run an offense. You
Right.
saw sometimes when Ron Harper Jr. Trying to bring the ball up, trying to initiate the offense, he's not a point guard.
Yep.
So that's what I mean by like he's not a floor raiser, he's a ceiling raiser. But
No,
right now
that's a really
on
good way
this
to put it.
squad,
That's a really good way to put it.
so yeah. All right, the topic of the hour, I guess.
I guess we have to get to it. There was stuff that came from places. This isn't the one that I wanted to talk about initially. We got a Mark Stein update. So some of our earlier updates on this saga came from Grange, who is a disputed source and also somebody who I was looking for the post. I couldn't find it like in the last 20 minutes before the stream, but somebody from it was either the Hoop Collective or it was one of those podcasts basically said that Grange report about the locker room discord was basically like straight from the team, right? And then you look at Grange and you think, okay, I don't think he gets a lot of reliable stuff from the team, but maybe he's not that guy. Maybe he's the guy who the team just like knows if we need to put something out there, he'll do it for us. So like that's his role in things, which is fair. But we've got some updates from him regarding David Thorpe said it. Thank you. Kenyon just put that in the private chat for me. But yeah, so the thing with Grange is like it's hard to understand where like information is coming from, how reliable it is, or even like in kind of in line with what I'm hypothesizing, how, like, what the purpose of it is, because this happens in like the information economy in sports media, is that not all information that's sent out is necessarily about putting something true out. It's about putting something out that improves your angle, it helps your narrative thrive, and like it's kind of a manipulative way to get your point across and improve your circumstances and whatever you're dealing with at the time, whether that's a trade negotiation or a contract negotiation. So to get kind of information from a bigger source, but to keep in mind a source that I think spoke a lot during our coaching hiring process, but I don't think got a lot right. So again, we gotta take everything lightly and just like think about it as information that is being put out for a reason, and we have to figure out what the reason is. So the Indiana Pacers have emerged as a legitimate trade partner with Toronto for Pascal Siakam, sources tell Mark Stein. Siakam is entering the final season of his contract, and reports of his potential availability have increased. The Atlanta Hawks have also logged interest in Siakam, while other teams could also emerge. Siakam has signaled a preference to remain in Toronto, but the departure of Van Vliet is believed to have led the team to prefer giving more runway to Scotty Barnes and OG Anunoby. And the last part, the Raptors are indeed far more prepared to surrender Siakam than initially realized. Okay, so first of all, my thoughts on the Indiana Pacers part of it, I don't buy it. I don't even think it makes sense if you look at the Pacers team, and we'll do that after me and Kenny kind of get our initial thoughts out. But if you look at that team, if you look at their salaries, if you look at what it would take to make a trade possible, there's not even necessarily a framework that makes sense, because if the Indiana Pacers, a generally young team, are trading for a 29-year-old Siakam, who we don't, from what we heard, isn't really looking to sign extensions with teams like Portland and Atlanta. So I don't know what would compel them to, would compel Pascal to agree to an extension with Indiana. Put that to the side. If they're pursuing that kind of a player, their goal is to win now, or at least in the next 2-3 years. So with that being the case, you would look at a piece like Miles Turner and think, why would they, trade for Pascal, but then trade Miles Turner and then have a hole at the center position, right? And also, why would we want Miles Turner? Because we have Jakob Poeltl. So you take Miles Turner out of the situation, now you have to look at the other pieces and even just figure out how they're going to get salary to Toronto to make this trade work. Are they going to trade us Buddy Hield? Again, another player that you would want in your win now pursuit. And a player on our end, Buddy Hields aren't really what we're looking for. I mean, we have Grady Dick right now, but that's one player. He's a much bigger player. He's a younger player that can be molded. A player like a Buddy Hield isn't what we've been looking for. I don't know how highly we would value him. Um, Look at their other players. Are we gonna be into the idea of having TJ McConnell and Daniel Tice? I mean, at that point, we're going full rebuilds, basically. Not full rebuild, but we're leaning into our younger talent and giving them opportunities. So now, GS400 says Turner and Nemhard. So that's my thing of like, I just don't understand from Indy's perspective. Like, if you don't have Miles Turner on your team, you have a hole at the center position. So you're now trying to win now with a generally young team and a hole at center. It kind of doesn't make sense. So this is my thing. We'll flush this out in greater detail later, but I can't see the viability of a trade that would make sense. I've thought it through. I've take issue with a lot of different things. I kind of believe that the fact that Indiana is being thrown out in this is more about Toronto trying to get Atlanta's trade offer to be better, if anything, because Indiana is a team with a lot of young pieces. If you go to Atlanta and say, "Hey, Indy's in the race," Atlanta might think, "Okay, we have to do better than some of the young pieces." That might compel you to put somebody on the table that you've been keeping off the table up to that point. So I see Indiana strategically as more of a negotiating piece. I don't actually even necessarily see them being a viable trade candidate, but we'll put that to the side for a second. Siakam's entering the final season of his contract, and reports of his potential availability have increased. The final year of his contract thing is interesting because I saw a piece somebody put out about how basically, um, like there's an angle to be looked at that with Fred VanVleet no longer being on the team, the Raptors may have a harder time being good enough for Pascal to even get that all NBA odds thing. Like it has nothing to do with Pascal at that point. He can play great, but his team also has to be good enough for him to get that type of recognition. So he might have a harder time getting this all NBA nod that in theory could get him the Supermax. And that could be a part of his thinking of maybe not wanting to take that bet again and wanting the max deal right now, which could be one of the things that causes a fracture between him and the organization. I posed the question during one of our streams, I think about 5 days ago, where I said, why, if Pascal wants to stay in Toronto and we want him in Toronto, and he's no longer Supermax eligible, and we would never like insult him to say he's not a max player, especially during the offseason, that Fred VanVleet got a max deal. I have a hard time imagining that I have a hard time understanding why there's not a extension that's been announced yet. And there's only kind of two reasons that that could be the case. And that's either Toronto doesn't want to pay him or they're open to trading him and they don't want to tie him down to a deal that means they can't trade him for a few months now. So it appears as though that now that the moratorium has ended and these extensions can be finalized, still hasn't happened yet. So there has to be some truth to the idea that yeah, Toronto is willing to trade him, and uh, basically the issue of the extension could be the reason. Pascal might look at it, well, like, you know what, yeah, this is where I want to be, but this team's probably not going to get me the All NBA nod. I'm not going to take the risk of maybe I get hurt and that messes up my contract. So I want that max right now. And now Toronto's looking at it like, well, maybe that's not really what we're into. And this could, conceivably be a reason. The reason could be we want to give a larger runway to Scotty Barnes and OG. GS400, thank you for all the engagement, by the way. Obi Toppin was very effective playing small ball 5. I think being effective at playing small ball 5 is good and viable and probably would be an effective thing alongside Miles Turner. I don't know if that's the best idea as a like that's the plan. Like that's just what we have at the 5. But it might be what they choose. Who knows? I'm not really all that familiar with what they had behind Miles Turner. Was it Jalen Smith at the 5?
It was.
It was. I mean,
And
Jalen Smith's kind of
it
on the
became that.
lighter side, so maybe that's what they want to do. Maybe that is their vision. I don't know. I'm not rolling yet with Indy and Siakams, but yeah, Kenyon, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Obi Toppin, I mean, yeah, you can play the small ball 5, but I don't think that that's a permanent solution. I don't think that Siakam playing the 5 is a permanent solution either, because that's when he tends to get injured, a la shoulder injury. So I don't think that that is where they're taking it. So if you take out Turner, also from a Raptor standpoint, you just signed a guy, okay? We just talked on the last stream that this front office moves. I think it's easier and faster to watch paint dry than to see them make moves. So at that point, right, you're seeing them move very slowly. How long would it take them? Because you can't move Turner you wouldn't be able to move the guy that you just signed until potentially the moratorium. So that's what, December or something like that.
Yep.
And also, you just sold Jakob Pertl because he said so in his presser. He mentioned Siakam by name in his presser. He mentioned Siakam by name right after the presser with William Liu, basically saying that that's one of the leaders that he expects to be here, that he was sold on. So you basically said, hey, re-sign with us. We're going to re-up you on a deal. And then to turn around, we're not talking months later where you've seen it work or not work or whatever. Later. We're talking days later. You're going to flip-flop and say, nah, we're good. And, oh, by the way, we're going to bury you and Koloko on the bench. I don't know about you, but to me, it doesn't make any sense from that standpoint. There is only one piece that I'm interested in. And by the way, people keep trying to say Jarris Walker. What are we doing? So if the plan, okay, is you're complaining about how there's a bad fit with Siakam and Barnes and Jakob, but you want Jarris Walker, who is an even worse shooter. Okay, this is what I don't understand, is that you're trading away the best shooter of all of them, and then you're like, no. Barnes can do it. Well, then you're really setting Barnes up to fail.
Yep. You're banking on
So
development in a crazy way. Like you're banking on a jump.
someone told me this stat. I'm going to tell you the stat right now. If Barnes increased his shooting by 8%, which is very
In terms
difficult
of
to do
volume, or
in
if
terms of
like
percentage.
okay.
So 8%
Yeah.
better as a shooter, he would still be below league average.
Yep.
Okay. I don't think that this is talked about enough. I really don't. And I'm not trying to diss the young man, but it's just like we don't really know what he is yet. And we just had a front office that called him a child, a baby in his presser. Literally in his presser. These are Masai's words. You can go back and watch, and he calls him a baby. He says Scotty is just a baby. And then you also essentially had to go and fly out 8 months ago on a road trip to essentially tell him to play harder. But this is the guy that you are now suddenly trusting with your entire franchise with nothing behind. And then, like I have said before, if you look at the packages, so without, there's only one piece, and you know the piece that I'm hinting towards because it's one of the it's the best Canadian on that squad. So if
Yep.
it's not that, I don't want to talk about it, right? Whether it's OG or Siakam, even if it costs OG and plus stuff, like that's really the only piece that I'm interested in. So at that point, it's like, what are we doing? It like if you're gonna trade Siakam again, unless you are 100% certain, and I know that there are some content creators out here that are that certain that literally I've heard that Scotty Barnes is gonna make a leap into all NBA this year, not all star, into a top 15 player this season when he regressed last season.
Wow.
Okay. People are that confident. I don't know about you. I'm very confident in Scotty Barnes. I don't know if I'm that confident that he can make that level of a leap based on what I've seen so far. Okay.
See, yeah, no, I don't think like I think it's fine to say that okay, he'll
We're
get
talking all
there by
NBA, man.
his prime. Like, we're talking about his prime because here's the thing. If he gets to all NBA at age 22, so what are we saying? He's going to be a Hall of Famer in his prime? Like he's going to be
That's
a
what they're
GOAT
saying. That is what
candidate
they're
kind of
saying.
a player,
That is
right?
exactly what they're saying. And I'm not saying that he can't do it. I'm just saying if you look at Vince Carter, look at
Yeah.
like because this is who people are comparing him to, right? Like that
Yeah.
level of a dude, right? Look at Vince Carter, years 1,
Mhm.
2, and 3. Look at Chris Bosh, years 1, 2, and 3. They improved every single year. So how is a guy supposed to go from what he was over the past 2 years, where it's not, to be fair, in some areas he did improve, yes, but overall it has been incremental, to then making more than a Siakam level leap in a year. I I I I need to see it first. And it doesn't, like, this is my point, is that if you're not going to get Matherin from a deal, you're getting Andrew Nemhard. Yay. Okay. I'm not trying to diss Andrew Nemhard. I'm just saying, like, does Andrew Nemhard project as either being a top 15 player or an all-star? So then you're putting your entire franchise's hopes on just Scotty Barnes becoming Luka level, and then hoping that down the road you can have enough pieces to piece together
Yeah.
to get him a running mate. Because frankly, I don't see OG becoming all NBA because his offensive game isn't that.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing with the Indy situation is that you look at the team. I have a hard time understanding what's in it for us or them under most like circumstances. Because again, they're a team that has a pretty long runway ahead of them because they have a young team that seems like it's building towards something. To then cut that off and say, "Hey, 29-year-old max player, we need that guy. We're going for it." That's a crazy pivot to take as a franchise. It makes very little sense. Like internally, the only way I could like rationalize it is if basically Rick Carlisle is getting itchy and he's like, "Hey, here for a good time, not a long time," kind of a thing, and just the franchise is buckling. But even that, I have a hard time understanding. And like, well, if that's who he was, Like I could see him maybe taking that kind of a stance if he didn't step into the rebuild in Indy, but he stepped into the rebuild. He didn't
I
just
mean,
get the job right now.
I'll give you a counterpoint to this, and it's not necessarily just Siakam. I keep going back to OG as my hint, right? Is that number one? Recently, the reports have been that they have $36 million in cap room next year and are targeting literally a 3-and-D wing, not forward, wing. So, and then they've been linked to OG multiple times. You look, if you're talking about Matherin as a potential get, you know, I don't see how Matherin fits in their system if OG's there. But my point is that they have the pieces that they are getting ready for consolidation. So I can see them trying to consolidate, whether it's OG, whether it's Siakam. Sure, I can get it from that standpoint. The packages without Matherin don't make sense to me because I I go back to the Atlanta, even your friend who's the OG man who is, you know, okay, I'm in the he is just like, yeah, I'm not really impressed by this package, right? It's like without and then without Kobe Buffkin, people are trying to sell us on Patty Mills. That how does that make sense? I don't make it make sense, please.
Don't please nobody talk to me about Jalen Johnson. Even AJ Griffin, like it's okay, but it's not particularly exciting. Like none of these options particularly make any sense.
There's a
Um,
Sacramento pick this year. They can't give us the Spurs swap because we would need to give them something for
a
that.
Sacramento pick, man.
The Sacramento pick is interesting, but it's like Sacramento is poised to get worse this year, but they're not going to be out of the playoffs, right? So
No,
then it's like, okay, um, again, it really depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to convey your pick this year? To me, just take the medicine, get it over with at the very least. And then, sorry, I'm ranting a bit. So
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. No, you're doing
no,
great. Go ahead.
but it's just, I just don't really understand that combined with the sales job of Pirtle a couple of days ago. And then why would you pick up guys? Here's a good question. Okay, Fred VanVleet's gone. Why would you spend all your money on Dennis Schroeder, okay, when you still have, if you're going to tank, essentially, and go into a rebuild, when you still have guys on the market that could have been had for the mid-level exception? I'll give you
Yeah.
one name who just signed a qualifying offer because the merry-go-round ended and he has no home. PJ Washington. You wouldn't want PJ Washington on this squad?
I'll take it. We can add to our team, but like I mean, like I said, like none of this is okay. This is a serious move, and we're taking strides. Like none of those seem to be on the board for us. So like you can't also like it's a delicate balance between, oh, we left the guy, you know, we left negotiations too late and now we're in free agency losing a guy for nothing, and then just like completely just giving up on somebody and trading him for, you know, Jalen Johnson,
What
right?
did Jake
Like
Fisher say the other day? He said that we have become known for basically, I'm going to paraphrase him a little bit, but basically for snooping and being into other people's business and not being serious about conducting business. So I'm sure
yeah,
that they are actually having conversations. I have no doubt about that. I
yeah.
don't think that they're serious. We were in serious conversations for Miles Turner for 2.5 years to get Thad Young. How's that for a wet fart?
And then eventually Jakob Pertl, right? So it's like we pulled the plug on that completely. So yeah, like I think what Jake Fisher also mentioned that basically like the vibe around how the league in terms of how we're being received as trade negotiators are basically, let's talk to you for an extended period of time to figure out how you value our players, and then
Snooping into
once we
other
have
people's
that
business.
information, yep, once we have that information, bye bye. So yeah, with that being the case, I think that I can understand other teams being frustrated, and I can understand other teams frankly kind of just not being strung along anymore. If that's something, if that's a reputation that we've built so far, I have a hard time understanding why teams are continuing to be strung along, which is where like when you see these things popping up, you have to think this came from somewhere. So what side could it come from, and what's the angle? Because somebody put this out there to be like for their own benefit, and you kind of have to work backwards to understand who would do it, what's the benefit, who stands to gain from this, right? Like,
Here's another thing. You are telling me, and listen, I get it. They chased after the dude, but you're telling me that they had their entire run it back claims hinging on Fred Van Vliet? On Fred Van Vliet? He ain't that dude. I'm sorry, no offense. Like I'm happy the brother got paid, but like he is not that level of a guy. Is
he
like
also is somebody who's been declining, in my opinion, because of injuries and kind of a pretty nasty run of games that he had to play about a year and a half ago. But it's not even a guy who's on the up or somebody who's been consistent in any level. So
but you're
I'll be
telling me that you're gonna just okay, Fred's gone, so well then let's pack it up. He wasn't even the best player. Like it
I mean,
doesn't make make it
he
make
was a
sense.
player. He was a player that I
Yeah,
don't think that this was a long term thing, but I
no,
think that there were some games where Fred wasn't playing that we looked a little bit better, right? And I think those
yeah.
were specific to certain matchups, right? There's certain matchups where if you're a lot bigger than the other team, which is basically what we'd be able to do when he's not playing, then it benefits you. And there's other kinds of matchups where not having Fred there was work to our detriment. But the point is it wasn't even like it's a hands down. Oh, we're a worse basketball team
No,
now.
I'm listen, I'm not trying to say that. All I'm saying is that you made moves that are still run it back even without Fred.
Yeah,
And so like okay, Fred's not back. You're telling me that all your run it back things hinged on Fred, like he was Kawhi. That's my
yeah, yeah,
point.
yeah.
It's like that makes zero sense.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And we don't even have our pick unless you want to go deal with the only team that's willing to deal with us, which is the San Antonio Spurs, because they know that they can pick our pocket again.
Yeah, because we're best friends in like the weirdest way, right? So what I would say is that do you like what I'd ask is, do you feel like you can put together a line of rationales that makes sense for what we've seen so far? Like, do you think you can put together a thought process that checks out with everything that's happened? And before Kenyon answers, just want to let everybody here know that you should be commenting on these videos. You should be liking the streams. I tagged Kenyon's channel, Basketball Rewind, in the title, and it's in the description of the video as well. So you can click any of those links to go in his channel and run up his numbers. These things help the channels grow. But yeah, go ahead, Kenyon.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just well, it doesn't make sense. I mean, okay. I realized because I've been spending some time listening to other fan bases talk, and that's a
Yeah,
very interesting thing. And not all fan bases sound schizophrenic, okay? Only ours does. And typically, what I'm realizing is that your fan base tends to mimic you, like the stability and strength of your organization. Okay, Masai or Bobby or whoever, how this is being run right now, what do you think that this does for culture? What do you think that this does for players? Right? If you're always out there and you're anxious, right? Like think about how anxious everyone is, and then you go and look at the players from the player perspective, because everyone forgets the human side of this stuff, right? And you are expected to play and perform every single day, right? I can tell you from more than likely from Pascal's situation, if I were him, I think he's doing the right thing. As crazy as that sounds. Now, I know that the Supermax is scary and stuff like that, but from his perspective, it's like, yo, these dudes keep jerking me around. So you're gonna pay me my money. He
I
was
think it's a
15
smart
votes
bet.
away.
I think it's a smart move for him to decide, you know what, it's not worth gambling some type of, the risk of me getting injured and now my value is tanked. The odds of me getting a super max aren't that high. I'm just going to secure my money right now.
I don't think he's gonna
I
get the Supermax, by the way, because I don't think he's
Oh,
gonna be
here's
all
the
NBA.
So this is what I'm saying. There's a very, very, very low percent chance that it happens. It would actually just not be smart for him to not take his extension and bet on getting the supermax. So he's doing what he should be doing. His agent is giving him sound advice. Um, and from the Raptor side of things, honestly, so here's my thing. I asked you that question for the to just kind of see if you had an idea. I personally have an idea of like what's going on with the Raptors right now, and what I think is
Posturing.
that I know. I just think the Raptors are like suffering from like smartest people in the room syndrome, which is a concept that just came up. But like
Hmm.
sometimes the worst place to be in is when you think you're just the smartest person in the room, and it really blinds you from acknowledging some of the issues that you might have in your way of looking at things. And I think, in a way, we've heard Masai tell us to our face his thought process over and over and over again of just we win, 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 win. What you do is win. The culture is win. Everything is about competing. Everything is about progression and going forward. And like there's this like he's constantly belittled the idea of not trying to win at every turn. And I think in winning a championship by having that way of thinking, he's emboldened like that thought process has been emboldened within his mindset. So now the whole thing is like, you know what? I don't have to do anything else. I did this and it worked. So I'm going to, win, 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 win. And again, like obviously the easy thing to say is, well, you haven't, right? And of course we haven't. But the point is like we're always trying. We're always trying to get better at every turn. And it's not like there's necessarily a problem with the idea, but the execution has been bad. And at some point, I think you have to take a step back and look at your failure in executing a game plan and saying, okay, maybe the flaw in this game plan is that it's very hard to execute. And maybe we should find a game plan that's a little bit easier to execute. And I think that's the problem is that, like, when you get caught up in just thinking that you're the smartest person in the room and you just are that guy, you tend to not be introspective enough to truly arrive at the right conclusions of your the right conclusions of like your history and what you've done and what you've gotten right and wrong. And I think that's my take on thing. My take is that like he's kind of it's been in front of us the whole time. He's gonna try to always get better. He's gonna always try to win, and it's frankly just failed miserably. I think this past year, um, the year before, like the fact that we pivoted from Marc Gasol and Ibaka to Aaron Baines, like not to necessarily focus on Aaron Baines too much, but the point is we tried to get a veteran to try to stay good. But the reality is, at that point where that team was, there was no point. We
So
weren't going to be great, right? But that's always been the attempt. But yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say. So I don't disagree with you in terms of like where the source of this is coming from. So that
Yeah,
I full agreement.
yeah.
I said, okay, here's a good. So do you listen? What kind of music do you listen to?
R&B, hip hop, some pop.
You're familiar with the guy Biggie, right?
Yes,
Okay, 10 Crack Commandments. Okay,
I'm familiar.
you know
Yep.
where I'm going with this.
Yeah, keep going, keep going.
You never get high off your own supply.
Yep.
And I was talking to Beyond about this, and it's like, and he said, I think these dudes are getting a little bit high off their own supply,
Yeah,
right?
it's funny because you say that. I've heard that exact phrase used. I think somebody on Reddit, I saw somebody say
Yep,
it. Just
yep.
that's what this front office is suffering from. But go ahead,
It's
continue.
it's true because it's like at some point you get spoiled by certain situations. You brought in OG Ananobi. He shot, I think, in the 50s or 60s percent. No, it was 50 percentage wise from free throw, and now you see what he's done. Right when
Yeah,
he first came in from college, you see Pascal Siakam, and you get spoiled for choice. And the problem is that these dudes think that they can take anyone from the local Y who's not in Miami apparently, and teach them how to play. And it just doesn't work like that because there's like there's situational awareness. I don't like using IQ because it can be used in a negative connotation. But it's just there's a lot more to this, and you're teaching a lot of dudes how to play basketball. You hear how he treats the bench every single year. It's like, okay, you have your starters, your core unit, but then the bench gets ignored, right? And it's like, it's because he views it like a soccer team with that bench, where it's like you have two different squads, and the bench is supposed to be internal. It's like whoever rises to the top makes it.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. You can't have five dudes all learning how to play. You should have a mixture, right? And it's just, to me, it's extremely frustrating, and it's frustrating for the players as well, because if the bench doesn't work out, right, you're screwed. You're absolutely screwed, because you run these dudes into the ground. It's disrespectful to their bodies that they sacrifice on the line. It's, like literally sacrificing their bodies. You saw Pascal, you saw Scotty playing like almost damn near 40 minutes. There were times, I don't know about you, but sometimes I have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the game, get a drink, a sip of water. Sometimes I would do that. I come back, I would leave. I'm like, oh, Pascal went out. It's commercial break. All right, gonna be right back. Take a piss, all that kind of stuff. Come back. By the time I come back, dude's back in the game. I'm like, what happened? Like, like they're like, that's crazy. That's crazy. And the other thing is that, like, every single time we have a coach and they ask for something, right? And then all of a sudden, the coach is the fall man, right? You get rid of the coach. The coach is basically saying, give me a bench. Okay, I've told you that he played that wrong, because he should have played the guys to show that they sucked. Fair enough,
Yeah.
though. Okay? And then all of a sudden, we now have a bench. All of a sudden, you now have Kawhi. Like, it took that long to get that. It doesn't. Again, I keep asking you, make it make sense. You're not making it make sense so far, because you're as confused as me. We just said that the guy is high off his own supply. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean he's acting rational.
Oh, it's specifically saying they're acting irrational. And again, if you need more evidence, people, our organization tried to revolutionize basketball. Basketball is a sport that's been played for like over 100 years by like millions of people. Many brains have put their input into this sport, and we've progressed it as a basketball community for as long as we have. And then Messiah Nick Nurse said, we're going to come up with a new way of playing the sport. That is a huge, you have to have a huge ego to even think you can reinvent a sport as a small group of individuals with no evidence that it's going to work. Vision 6 9, there was no evidence that it was going to work. It was an
Well,
attempt.
I'll, I'll say this. I think the actual overall vision is fine,
Yeah.
because there's other
Yeah.
teams that are doing it, or versions of it, better than we are, right? Utah.
Mhm. Oh, 100%.
Utah.
But that's the thing, is like the
Orlando
fact that
Magic.
other teams doing it better, right? The thing they're doing that's different from us, I think makes it a different thing. So like
Mhm.
you like having players that basically like Utah doesn't have a lack of threes the way we have. Orlando to a certain degree has a lack of threes that we have, but also like
Mhm, mhm,
they were significantly worse than us for a reason. But
mhm.
also, I believe they drafted two guards, so I think they're tuned into it. I'm
Well,
not familiar
they've
with the
been
guards they
very
drafted.
yeah. So Jet Howard's a guard, kind of only because of his size. He's not really a guard. Anthony Black can't really shoot. I think the thing with Orlando, he's good though, but yeah. And Orlando is actually quite guard heavy. I In fact, I would actually say Orlando is definitely doing this, because their old GM, who's now their president of operations,
Yeah,
Jeff Weltman, was
they
part of us.
traded for him from Toronto. I think
Yeah.
we got a draft pick for him.
So I mean, there's nothing wrong with the vision, but you have to pivot, right? The problem is to your point, if you listen very carefully to I'd say the last 10 minutes of that press conference with Masai,
Yeah.
and it was actually Will Liu was kind of grilling him a little bit and saying like, well, like, can we get like, basically paraphrasing again, can we get someone different, or are you sure that this is going to work? And again, it's not that like having positionless basketball doesn't work. It's having positionless basketball and thinking that you can teach every single dude off the street how to play, when some of these dudes can barely dribble and stuff like that, or know what to do, that can work. He said in the presser, this is Masai saying, he was like, these other teams kept going until it worked. So you are correct. He said it with his own words. Go back, listen to it, and then you can make a stream out of it.
Reaction stream coming soon, people. But yeah, this is the thing, right? Like they tried to do something, and fair, we could say that there's like variants of it in the NBA, and there's evidence that there's encouraging signs for it, right? But the idea that you're basically, because again, we're trying to develop players while trying to win now. I also think that there's a fundamental flaw with trying to put those two things together in the face of it not working, and then just continuing to try to make the two things go together. But again, like so essentially what you're saying is that like tactically we're going to overcome for the fact that these guys can't play basketball right now, which is a huge like
I don't think
assumption
that
and
it's
claim.
that though. Like I don't think it's that. I really truly think that they think that their development system is that good.
I definitely agree about that, but the thing is like you're playing guys right away or relying on guys right away, so it's like you're not even giving them the opportunity to be in the development
This is the problem
system.
though, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like if you have if okay, I'll I, I'll put it this way, right? And this is why I say like it's about part of it is like the on-court basketball acumen that some of these dudes possess, right? If you swap, imagine Otto Porter was actually somehow healthy enough that you can actually play him 20 minutes a game without him breaking down. You swap all of his minutes with Bo Cruz's minutes. Are we not a better
Yeah.
team? Right?
Yep.
But the problem is that, and that was like them trying to pivot, but that's like 2 years too late, right?
Yep.
Like it's the problem has been the learning process. Because again, I keep telling people if you put, geez, I'm trying to think. If you put Lonzo Ball, healthy Lonzo Ball, of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
on this team in the place of Fred VanVleet, Lonzo Ball, he fits Vision 6'9". When he's healthy, he shoots pretty much damn near close to 40% from three. Are we a better team?
Yep.
So it's not that the vision doesn't work. It's that you have so many projects, and then again, you think that within 6 months or whatever between now and training camp that you can teach these dudes how to play. How the heck is that supposed to work,
See,
man?
this is what I'm saying. I lump all these things together because at the end, like you're trying to execute this a certain way, and your approach is fundamentally not working. So, like the insistence that it's going to work is a part of the vision for me because we did it pretty uniquely. We did it in a way that like haven't seen Orlando necessarily be so stubborn about their players the same way. Like I don't think they're trying to force the issue with Jalen Suggs the same way we're trying to force the issue with some of our guys. Um, you mentioned Utah. Utah has a lot of threes, man. Like Utah has a lot more threes than we do, and it's
They
just
just
like
drafted a walking bucket, two walking buckets,
yes,
right?
yes,
Bryce Sensabaugh is a walking bucket. He's a walking bucket, and he was available late too, right? And Keontae George, and some guy that we haven't even seen yet, which is Taylor Hendricks, who he can also shoot the three. And Taylor Hendricks is I think 6'10".
yep,
Like the problem isn't the height. The problem is the other skills. You can't have Precious and Boucher and you know what I mean? That is like thing and another dude and another dude and another dude where they all have the same skill set.
yep.
There's only 48 minutes in a basketball game.
Oh yeah.
And if you're trying to learn different skill sets, you can't learn them all at once. And so at some point you do need to have it's I keep going back to Dwayne Casey. People made fun of him, but you know what? You got to appreciate the dude. Here's your role card. You are doing two things. You need to have a diversity of skill sets. This is why the Grady dick pic is a great, as much as it's a funny phrase to say, it's a really important thing because guess what? He knows how to pass. He knows how to shoot.
Yep.
He knows how to defend to a moderate degree, right? So you're not teaching him. This is why I keep saying it's like you're not teaching a dude how to play basketball.
There's a skill set that exists immediately that you're going to pour into and hopefully see flourish into other things, but like also the skill set that you drafted it's exactly what you're missing. So you could make the point that, and I think I've already seen some people touch on the fact that maybe there were better players, but like put that aside because it's way too early to make that kind of assumption. There's a possibility that there's a better player that you passed up on, but it was fine because you picked a player that suited exactly what you needed the best, right? So, and that's my thing too, is like eventually I think they learned, but because I looked at Christian Coloco as a departure from Vision 6.9 while keeping Vision 6.9 principles, right? Because that doesn't align with what we were doing the year before. But as a 7 foot traditional center, he's a player that's going to be able to like scramble as a defender in the way that like our front quarter forwards used to do defensively when it was just them, right? So we can keep a lot of our principles and they'll still function with a player like Christian Coloco. And obviously offensively there's a big gap because not a ball handler, um not somebody that can really stretch the floor despite the fact that he really thought he could. But like we have enough principles to still have our style of play, but it's a little bit more encompassing of different skills. So that made a lot of sense. I think we just got rated. There's a spike in viewers, so I'm just gonna quickly
Yep.
run through the chat real quick. Tom Graham says, "Enjoying the stream, thanks guys." Tom Graham is tuning in from Australia, so we really appreciate him being here with us. Tom, if you're ever interested in being on the channel, I think that'd be awesome to hear from somebody who has a pretty unique Raptors fan experience, different than a lot of us here. Then I got Prime up in here saying, "Big up Alum as the growth of the channel. I may not know what you're saying as I don't follow basketball, but be knowing you, I know you're talking facts. I appreciate you, Prime. 6 live viewers, 8 likes. Make sure everyone hit the like button. Let's get it up to 10 likes minimum by the end of the stream. Yes, sir. Um, Shout out Manj. Shout out Harris. Big up from London. Let's go. 25 people in here. Make sure you're pressing the like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. You guys are here from Sarcasm City. A lot of you guys are probably familiar with me, but not familiar with what I'm talking about. So if you just want to support me, make sure you're doing that. I have Kenyon's channel also tagged in the title and in the description of the video. So you can quickly click the link on that, subscribe to his channel as well, run up the likes on some of his videos. All the support is appreciated. Tom Graham says would love to. Okay, so Tom, Toronto Hoop Talk is on Twitter and Instagram, and I believe on Facebook as well. I'm not sure, but these are
Put it in the
different ways
chat,
you.
man. Put
Yeah,
put your link in the chat.
okay, I'll put it in the chat. But what I just want to ask is that whatever way you have of reaching out to me, let me know, and then I'll put the link in the chat to how to find me, and then we'll definitely be in touch. I'd love to hear your Raptors fan story and experience, and I think it'd be awesome to have you on the channel. Back to our issues with the Raptors. We talked a lot about the way of playing that we have and some of the pitfalls with it. Is there anything else you have left before maybe we transition to probably the last part of the stream?
Yeah. I guess my question is, what do you want to do now, based on the information that you have in front of you? What do you want to do, and what do you think that they will
Or
do?
organization wide or Siakam specific?
Both. Both.
Okay, organization wide, I think we should be a little bit more I think decision making should be rooted in what happens in front of you on a basketball court, right? Like what you see in front of you in terms of things working and not working should dictate how you make future decisions. So I'm all for thinking outside the box. I'm all for trying new things. I'm all for trying um stuff that maybe doesn't make sense in the moment, but you kind of have to pivot from things as they don't work a little bit quicker. So I just want to see that a little bit more reflected in the thought processes and in the decision making. So that's one thing. Another thing I want to see organization wide is I want to see a higher hit rate on bringing young players into the system. So that's across the board. That's draft picks, undrafted players, low salary signings in free agency, biannual exceptions, um, minimum salary signings, uh, summer league players. Again, the bar isn't high, but if one guy makes it off your summer league team, that's awesome. If one guy in 3 years makes it off your summer league team, that's awesome. The G League. I remember Chris Boucher's season in the G League, and um, seeing a role, but also just being excited in what was going to happen when he got to the Raptors. And even though he's just a bench player, think it's been exciting to see the development, and it's been reassuring to it was reassuring at the in the moment to kind of see that we had a plan for a player and we could see it through. So that's one thing. And then I guess last of all is that I want I want to see us building a team with defined roles a little bit better. So what I mean by that is if we're going to try to be a team that is opportunistic in the trade market for that final piece when it comes to winning a championship, um, we always talk about the Kawhi trade, but it's like those are the kind of circumstances that are going to lead to our next championship, whenever that is, if that ever happens. Fingers crossed. But you have to be within reach of that kind of a move being possible. And I think to be at that position when you're within reach, you kind of have to have a team around waiting for that player, so that but and now what I'm saying is that team would have to have a certain roles checked off. So you want a floor general, you want somebody that's going to be able to command a team, you want your wing shooters, you want your big, you want your stretch four, you want your glue guys. I just want to be able to look at a team and see guys, because I was thinking, when we drafted Delano Banton, I saw Delano Banton and I was like, maybe Sean Livingston, right? And I'm thinking of how I saw Sean Livingston on old Warriors teams, and I saw the role he had on, I would say, an important role on teams. And thinking about, hey, we drafted a guy in the second round. Do I expect him to be Nikola Jokic? Of course not. But if he can be Sean Livingston, that's awesome. And I can check that box to say, when we make that Kawhi trade, we have our backup point guard, right? But I just want to be able to look at a team and see that better, because when I look at a team and I look at our young players and even just the roster as a whole, I have a hard time even just being able to project what's going on. And the reason I think that, again, the reason I think that it's not good is because it keeps you far away from even being within one trade away from being good. And I just think that that's the situation you need to be in, because I don't think those championship winning trades are even possible that often, right? Like the Kawhi deal was a very unique set of circumstances. Unique set of circumstances don't happen all the time. So you have to be ready for when they happen. I would hate for us to miss the next opportunity. Like, we know that Damian Lillard wants to go to Miami and he's pretty, he has his heart set on Miami. What if his heart wouldn't be set on Miami if Toronto looked like they were one player away, right? Again, it's just completely abstract idea, no truth rooted in it. But what if that would be the case, right? What if the next time a Damian Lillard situation happens, we're also not one player away. So that's just what I ran off a few things there, but basically I just want to see I think stuff that's more common sense. I don't know. I think at the end of the day, while achieving things can be hard, the plan can be simple in a way, because at the end of the day, basketball is basketball. We've watched basketball for a long time, all of us. We've seen a lot of great teams, and there is a pretty basic blueprint of, you need your Hall of Fame talent, you need the players that complement them. If we're going to get to the Hall of Fame talent last, we need the players to complement them. So, these things are all things that feel kind of simple to just speak about. They're not the most complicated things, and these things don't have to be made complicated. So yeah, I want to see stuff that makes sense, that's simple, that you can look at it and you can look at what the next 2-3 years are going to be. And I think it would be a refreshing change. But yeah, what about you?
Well, and then specifically about Siakam this year.
Okay.
What do you want to
Oh,
see?
about Siakam this year. So I want us to hold tight until January. And the reason being is that I think a lot of our players, aside from Siakam's the outlier, but a lot of our players have had their value basically hit rock bottom because of the season we had last year. Siakam, his value is probably at an all-time high, but he's a player with only 1 year left on his deal, and he's not looking to extend his deal. So those aren't particularly good circumstances to trade a player in. So I don't clearly, based on what we've talked about with Indy and Atlanta, I don't like the trade offers. I think the trade offers could be better in the future. They could be better midseason if a team gets desperate. They could be better in the future if we extend Siakam. And again, circumstances are better in the future. But I think that across the board, unless you get a trade that is pretty head and shoulders, like not head and shoulders like above value, but just clearly a good trade, You sit tight. You hope that you're better. Not even better. You hope that you're good. You hope that your team looks good. So now everybody's value is high. And then once your team is good, you can look at how the team is playing and then identify, okay, what's missing, what's needed, who
So
looks like they have a role that could suit us for the next 2 3 years, who doesn't, and then you make decisions then.
right. So and in terms of Siakam, are you against re-signing him next year?
Oh no, I'm not against resigning him.
Okay. Um. Hmm. Interesting.
So
Okay.
here's the thing. So I'm not against resigning him. A caveat I want to put is that the game that we're playing, it feels like a game that may rub him the wrong way. So we might not even be in a situation where, if we want to resign him, that it's guaranteed. I just want to throw that in there because that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
a
No.
part
No.
of
No.
the
I.
thinking
I
when it comes to
agree.
these things. But I think that ultimately, like, um, you have a guy that is making it clear that, or as it's being spoken about, is making it clear he wants to stay here. You have a guy whose value is demonstrated. And for as much as he takes care of himself in the era of sports medicine extending careers, I think re signing him is the best route if Jalen Johnson is what you get from Atlanta and Andrew Nemhard is what you get from Indiana.
Yeah. So I agree with everything there. I think in terms of Siakam, even if you're paying him, so there's a couple reasons why I don't think he's going to get a supermax. Number one, voters are strange. They tend to go and how they vote with trajectory. So if you had a down year the year before, you almost have to be that much better to get back into the race, unless you're one of these legacy guys, right? So unless the Raptors, unless I know the East got a little bit weaker with a couple teams, but unless the Raptors are top 3, top 4, it might be a little bit tough for him to get into that mix, right? Um, Now, there's other circumstances. I know games played and all that, but I think that they are playing a game where, number one, based on reports, they haven't really offered the extension anyways. So for all those who are putting it all on Siakam, all the reports from Aaron Rose, from Will Liu, and others is that they haven't really offered him the extension. I think that they're trying to be cheap. They did the same thing with DeMar DeRozan, right? Part of the reason why DeMar was traded was because they didn't want to pay him, and because his extension or contract was coming up. I think the reality is, even if he does make All NBA, you're the only team that can pay him a supermax, a designated veteran player extension. So you don't have to necessarily give him 35% of the max. You just have to outbid the market, and you can. So that's why that's where I see things heading. And I agree with you, unless or until someone actually gives you a halfway decent offer. Like I said, I don't think I'm being unreasonable by saying if I'm going to deal with Indiana, I want Mathurin. If it was going to be, um, if it was going to be Portland, if it's not Scoot, then I wasn't really
Shaden.
interested. But at the very bare minimum, it has to be Shaden Sharp, because you have to get someone, again, like I said, unless you think that Barnes is not just all NBA, but he has to be MVP level. Because if you look at Luka, who is all NBA level, he still can't get, like on his own
He's
last
not a
year.
part. He's not a part of like MVP discussions.
He's just not. But even if he was, it's like, how far did Luka get on his own? And like, I'm sorry, but Barnes is not Luka. It's
Yeah,
not. That is not a diss to Barnes, right? I'm
yeah.
just saying, like, it's really hard in the era of parity and in the era where guys are getting better and better coming in terms of their floor, to be transcendent. And so unless you have, I think the only guy that I can really think of is the guy that can't, apparently has trouble staying healthy, and allegedly has a whole bunch of milkshakes and stuff in his bathroom, which is Zion Williamson, right? He's the only dude.
Milkshakes in the bathroom.
But
My
it's true,
goodness.
right? Like, it's like he's the only dude that you can think of in the past few years that has been drafted that is transcendent, like really, truly, like transcendent. Like, whoa, like no one's stopping this dude on the court. So again, it's all hopes and prayers and thoughts and thanks, right? And it's and unless I'm getting a decent package for a borderline all NBA player, I just don't see it. I don't, I'm not against it. The other problem that I'll say really quickly is about culture. You need some sort of level of stability. And I agree with you about the roles. That actually has to come not just from the coach, but it has to come from the front office down. It really does. And at some level, you need to provide that stability. If you trade, I get really worried. Okay. And this, again, this is not me trying to diss any player on our team, but I get really worried that if we lose Siakam for nothing, or if we lose Siakam for Andrew Nemhard and Jarice Walker, and that's all you have, I don't know if we have enough stable leadership on this current squad. Like, I don't think that like Dennis Schroeder is enough to stabilize that locker room and make it work. Not to mention that you would also still have dudes that are here that are going into contract years like Precious.
Yep.
So I just don't really know what happens in that sort of situation. Yeah, just like how Tom's saying, I'm not sure that there's an ideal pack. Listen, I'm not saying that you have to get ideal, but you can't give me, as Beyond says, you can't piss on me and tell me it's raining. Okay, there's
Those are facts. Those are facts. Also, real quick, Tom. Just let me know if you're the Tom that just followed me on Instagram of like 10 minutes ago. I believe that's you. But yeah, if you could just confirm. So yeah, so here's my thing about Siakam and just the roster as a whole, right? I look at the players that we have, particularly Siakam, OG, and Scotty Barnes. You guys don't have to be the guys, right? But you have to help us get the guys. That's unfortunately just what we have to expect from the situation, because
a bare minimum.
you guys have to help us get, like I look at Scotty, right? Cool. Um, you
You
probably
see, they're
don't.
telling
You're
you to get,
probably
you gotta get your IG game up or your Threads
bro. I
game up
do. I
soon.
do. Actually, oddly enough, today I was figuring out how to like format the um the clips from YouTube, how to format them into like real size and TikTok size. But yeah, I'm gonna hit up IG Reels and TikTok and throw clips all over there. It's coming. It's coming. I'm growing and expanding my skill set, Peter.
Can I plug just one thing for a second?
Go
Yeah.
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I actually talked to Malachi Flynn, like actually,
Okay, Mr. Source is here.
and yeah, and he said that he's not playing. No, no, but I actually did talk to him, and there is a video that I will be dropping. I think probably next month. It's not necessarily related to this directly, but it is somewhat related because we're talking about player anxiety a little bit and how this front office is crazy. And essentially, he actually talked a little bit about mental health supports and stuff like that. So I'll be dropping. I'm trying to figure out a way. I have the audio. I'm just trying to figure out how to make it into something. So if I don't think I've actually ever once plugged myself. You've plugged me, so, and I appreciate that. But yeah, so if people want to check out Basketball Rewind and sub to my channel, as well as give this channel a like and a sub, that'd be much appreciated. But yeah, sorry, you were saying.
Nah, just like so. The point I was initially making was I was like, okay, cool. I don't think any of those guys are Kawhi, right? But you could be DeMar, who got us Kawhi. Like neither of you have to necessarily be what Pascal was in that championship team. But if you could help be traded, if you could help by getting traded for that guy, that helps too. And the key thing there is that you can't waste them, because that is objectively getting nothing. So that's the thing when it comes to these deals. Again, you're talking about Pascal Siakam for Jalen Johnson, AJ Griffin from Atlanta, or Andrew Nemhard and who's the other guy in the backcourt? Aaron Neesmith from Indy. That is basically like that's just giving up in the hope of those guys being traded for the actual guys. So if that's the case, like to kind of reframe losing somebody in free agency, you end up at the same point with both of them in that you failed the objective,
But
right?
even that, wouldn't you want to get a guy who could potentially pop like a Matherin? Because even if he
Yeah,
doesn't, he's closer to being a piece that you can trade for the guy.
yeah.
You see
I
what
mean,
like it's like even that it's like either way you're hoping that someone's going to work out either to become a piece or whatever, but you might as well get the guy with the best potential without going to the extreme of getting like Bilal, right?
yeah,
Um now and yes, they are solid, but I'm not looking for solid. I'm looking for the next, I'm getting rid of a skill set or trading a skill set, and I'm just responding to the GS 400, and I want to get that better in terms of the money. I want to talk about that because GS in your chat he's saying
yeah.
that
So
yeah. So you
are you going to get to what happened last summer? Because I was just going to mention that so that GS is aware. So Pascal Siakam was offered a max contract extension last year. He turned it down, basically betting on the fact that he could get All NBA and be Supermax eligible, and he did not get that. So with that happening, the assumption is that obviously having turned down the max last year with the aim of getting a super max, he's not gonna have dropped off of wanting to be a max player, and he is a max player. So it's not about 40 a year; it's about max, which is a fluctuating number. But yeah, his max deal will be much higher than 40. I worked it through somewhere else,
mm-hmm.
so
Absolutely.
yeah, it's much higher than 40, and it's what he deserves. We just saw Fred VanVleet get a max deal. It was basically a 2-year deal, but it's a max deal. There's no circumstances in which Fred VanVleet can get a max deal under any circumstances, and Pascal Siakam is not a max player. So it's what he deserves. It's what he will get if it's not from Toronto. And then the other thing I wanted to say was Mudbone. What are you asking about in terms of what's the real issue? What's the real issue between him and the Raptors, or what's the real what's like? I'm just trying to get familiar with what you want to know. Why should other teams risk giving up their assets to get Pascal, knowing that he probably won't sign back with them like he
Well,
said he was
I
gonna do?
yeah, there's a
Sure. Do you
big
want to go ahead?
reason why. Yeah,
Go ahead.
if you get his bird rights, the chances are you are more than likely going to re-sign him, right? Like you have the most negotiating power in terms of leverage. So this is why forget about the super max, right? For a second, it's just like even signing him to a max, which is very different. You're talking about the difference between 89 million approximately, I think, just off the top of my head. It's like if he gets the super max, it's like 289 versus 205 if he lets it go all the way to free agency, or 206, sorry.
Yeah.
At that point, there's a very big difference. This is also the other thing is that you're gambling, which is probably a fair and smart gamble, that truth be told, unless you're sending him to somewhere that he really doesn't want to be, and I'm not gonna diss markets right now, but there are certain markets that he may not want to be in. Then more than likely you're going to be in a place to probably re-sign him and keep him. But you also have to factor in like other things. He is at least been a borderline all NBA player through and through and through at least 3 times thus far, right? Because he was off by 15 votes from being a third team all NBA player this year, which would have been his third in I think 4 years or 5 years, sorry. But point is that I think that Siakam is a good player. I think we lost Alam for a second.
Now I'm here.
Yeah, he's here. I hate this conversation because there's always this whole thing of like every single time, whether it was DeMar, whether it was Siakam now, whether it I Beyond made a good point to me where he pointed out that people used to complain about paying Vince Carter back in the day. And there's always this thing of like, oh my gosh, we have to pay this dude, blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. And listen, I do agree. I've already said on your live, people go back to your old videos, give you some more views. is that in terms of the supermax, I don't think that we should necessarily be looking to pay him the supermax. I don't think we should be paying a lot of players the supermax because of the salary cap implications. But with that being said, I do think that if he's worth a max, right, then pay him the max, or when it comes to it, you pay him the max, because number one, you do have to pay a certain amount of people a certain amount of money each year to even get any sort of tax payments coming back to you. And number two, you don't want to develop a reputation for like not paying dudes, right? And then the third thing is that, sorry, I'm just reading, and that's the issue with contending teams. Well, exactly. That's the problem, is that a lot of the, right as it is right now, a lot of the teams that would normally want to Siakam, they don't really have the assets that you want. And then a lot of the young teams, it just doesn't really match up. So it's kind of a weird situation, which is why we are what we are. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
no,
sorry.
to quickly just address a couple things because you kind of lead it into it.
Mhm.
Raptors missed a chance to trade him when his value was high last summer. In theory, yes. In practicality, no. We thought we were good last year. We were a 5 seed that we thought we got. We thought we improved. So it was not going to happen under any circumstances. So that's part of the reason why it didn't happen, and um, that's why like you can't really look at it this way. It doesn't quite make sense given the fact that we thought we were good. And then just because we never quite got to this and it was asked about. So basically,
Mhm.
we don't know any real information. We can only speculate. But part of the speculation is that, again, Siakam turned down the max extension last year to try to get a super max. And now he's walked that back. He didn't make the super max last year. I don't think he wants to make that bet again. There are different things to think about in that he could obviously suffer an injury that tanks his value. Um, but also the Raptors are probably going to be at best the same next year, maybe slightly better. So, given the fact that if you want to be an all NBA player, your team does have to have some type of success, the odds of that happening are pretty small. This isn't a situation where you can make these like big, broad statements like with certainty, but the
I think we'll
reality
be
is that
better.
it's not a smart bet for him to make that bet that he'll get the supermax next year. So people are talking about how he wants his money now. He wants that max extension. He's not super max eligible right now. He's not making the bet going forward. And that's kind of where the thing with the Raptors are, is that he's telling other teams he doesn't want to extend with other teams. He wants to extend in Toronto. So the issue has to be on Toronto's side. Toronto, for whatever reason, isn't putting that contract on the table. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't guarantee it won't still happen. It could still happen. But we're actively talking to other teams about trading him. It's been documented talks with Portland. It's been documented extensively talks with Atlanta. People are bringing up Indy now. I still kind of don't believe it with Indy, but yeah, this is kind of where it is. Is I think Toronto isn't at a situation where it's like Pascal has to go. We have to trade him. Toronto's in a situation where it's like, well, we either extend him or trade him. Let's look at the market and see what the market says. Let's gather information to help make a more informed decision, because
Mhm.
you don't want to extend him having not turned every leaf in the trade market to identify whether trading him was the right decision. So that's the situation. It's not that there's necessarily a problem, as we know. There
Mhm.
could be, but we just don't know about it. Um, Renting a player for minimum assets to chase a ring also makes sense for certain franchises. It does. I'm
Yeah,
just
but you don't
curious
want
as
to
to
be the
whether
merchant franchise either. Like you don't want to gain that kind of reputation of being like the merchant franchise.
the thing is like possibly, but also I think some teams would just like they would take the risk just
Mhm.
because they feel like they're that close. My only curiosity is like I wonder which franchises look at themselves as a Pascal Siakam away from contending. Like I wonder how he's seen as a player and how teams look at their own teams and in relation the two things in relation to each other. Because I don't know, it just doesn't feel like a lot of teams would be like, you know what, guys, Pascal Siakam is what
I,
pushes
I
us
can give
over the
you a
line
couple
this year.
teams right now.
Peter brings up Dallas. Who did you have in mind?
Okay, so yeah, okay. There's a couple teams right now, and I'm not even talking about like frameworks for trades. Just if
Yeah.
you put Siakam on that team, could they win? First of all, the Suns, like without question, because they already have depth issues, and like Siakam would help a lot. I think Golden State. is another one, right? Like you're telling me that his gravity wouldn't help Steph?
I mean, other way around as well. But
That too.
so
That
the thing
too.
with both cases, right, is like Pascal Siakam spent a long time of his career effectively being a role player. So that's a role that he would have known more than being the player that he's been the last 2 to 3 years. This was a guy who was, I think, the number 5 guy in a starting lineup with Lowry, DeRozan, Damari Carroll, and Valanciunas, I think, at the time. Like
Mm-hmm.
he was just a hustle guy in that starting lineup in his rookie year, and then he was a part of a great bench unit in his second year, and then he was a starter on a championship team where he was probably the second option, but still wasn't like a high volume guy. This is a guy that knows how to impact basketball in role player kind of ways while also having the offensive upside to
I'll give you
to
another team.
function as a number 2 option. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, if you put Siakam right now, if you swapped him and Sabonis, are the Kings not better? Think about
Uh,
the playoffs and think about where Sabonis struggled.
yeah. No, he's definitely better, but because also he's gone through his own personal struggles in the playoffs to identify how he has to expand his game to cope
Mm-hmm.
with those moments, which Sabonis did, and I don't know if he'll cope with them. But yeah, Siakam has more been there, done that, and he's
Yeah,
definitely a player that you put him and De'Aaron Fox on a court together. That's a whole lot of dog,
yeah, but
a
Sabonis
whole lot of dog.
also never showed any capacity to shoot at that level at that range either. He was never going to be a mid range guy, and that was actually always a struggle with him in Indiana. So I don't see him addressing that in a real substantial way. If I mean I can still keep going, right? There's quite a lot of teams. Dallas is another one, as your friend pointed out. There's teams, and that's just the Western Conference. If you put Siakam, they don't have the assets for it, but if you put Siakam on the Celtics, they'd probably be better.
I wonder what the Celtics would trade.
They'd have to trade Brown, which would be an interesting thing. I don't think it would work out as well as people would think, but I know some people would do that trade. But I think
Yeah.
Siakam is a much better. Let me ask you this. It's a
Okay.
little bit off
Shoot.
topic, and then we'll get back on topic.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a team that has won without having at least the ability to thrive in the mid range, including Golden State?
Oh, I'm with you with that. I this is the take that I talked about. I think maybe a couple years ago for the first time. No, you need a mid-range killer on your team, at least one. You need a mid-range killer on the championship team. Part of the reason why I like Phoenix so much is that like when shit gets ugly, if you have some guys that can just like pull up and shoot mid-range pull-ups, basically, at an effective rate, you can get yourself out of jams. And like,
Mm-hmm.
people always talk about good basketball, right? I think there's so much value in being able to play good basketball and ugly basketball because like inevitably the good basketball it has its runs where it's viable, and then it has its moments where like things just aren't working out for you. So for you to be able to get ugly and still you're decently efficient offensively, that's really important when it comes to winning 16 games in the playoffs. Now, mid-range shots is I think like the best ugly basketball in a way if you have an efficient player, because it's not the shot that the defense is trying to take away, right? If you have a guy that's head down going to the basket, a team can build a wall in front of the basket. Shout out one of the Van Gundys. um Teams are going to chase you off the 3-point line, or at least try to. You can have the mid range if you want it. If you have the guys that can shoot it, it's effectively unstoppable because it's in nobody's best interest defensively to stop it. So, yeah, you need the mid range, and a lot of teams have had mid range guys.
So your GS said a couple of things. One of them is directed at me. He said, "What assets?" So my point wasn't that there's a trade to be made. As I said, this is just a thought experiment that if you dropped Siakam on these teams, forget about the trade and all that kind of stuff. But if you magically waved a wand and he was on those teams, would they be better and would they win? And that's my point. And in terms of Sabonis, yes, he is a hub, but he's mainly a hub because he's able to he's a really good screen setter and he's good in DHOs, handing it off to Fox to allow
Yeah.
Fox to go downhill. That's the real secret to their offense, is that they are able to do that within that Princeton offense. In terms of Siakam not being paid, this is the thing that I really want to address, because it really, it's something that a lot of people try to claim. And it's like, they've been saying this about this dude. And I brought up Vince Carter. They did the same thing with Vince Carter before. You got to stop it, because it's like, people were saying when he got this current contract that he wasn't worth it. People said Ben Simmons is worth more. Ben Simmons is on the bench right now. Too afraid to play. Sabonis made more this year. I think that if you look at the numbers, if you look at the advanced metrics as well as the eye test, Siakam was a better player. Sabonis was on a better team, but Siakam was a better player. I can go down the list. I think Kevin Love might have made similar value to Siakam this year. Kevin Love, before he
Oh,
got waived.
financially. Yeah.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. I'm talking about financially, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we got to stop pocket watching these dudes, right? Like, at some level, it's like you don't ever get what you deserve. You get what you have the leverage to negotiate. And so I think if you're focusing, it was addressing this thing.
Yeah.
I think that Siakam getting paid more than $40 million, because frankly, like, again, people don't recognize that, like, there is the new TV deal coming, okay?
Yeah.
That is slated to pay us 10 times the amount of money, not to mention the gambling that's coming up, okay? There's money
And
coming
it's
into
going to
this league.
continue to roll in, because only more and more states are going to legalize gambling, and that's a never-ending stream. And something to keep in mind, right? In the next CBA, they capped salary cap increases, so it's going to be capped at 10%, but basically
Just
they'll
to move
roll
it.
over excess into future years to prevent the one-time jumps that created, like, the Timothy Mozgov and Joakim Noah contracts, the Chandler Parsons contracts, right? So the thing is, right, with all this money coming in, you can actually effectively project that in the next 7 to 8 years, maybe even further, you're going to see that 10% jump consistently. And because
10,
there's that set figure, you can actually project the salary cap for the next decade and be accurate. Because I have a hard time imagining that it won't cap out at the full 10% jump every single time with all the excess, because there will be certain rushes that cause the excess that has to continue over. So you can effectively project the salary cap going forward. And with those continued jumps, right, you have to keep in mind with max deals, a max deal is a percentage of 1 year's salary cap, so the first year, then 8% increases of that number going forward. So with the cap going up and up and up, right, the value of a max contract becomes less and less as time goes on. So my thing is, right, like, you have to use precedent. There's a pretty strong precedent for players that aren't necessarily like bona fide number one options to get that max number, whatever it is. It happens a lot. So Pascal is worth a max because a team would give him a max, because teams have routinely given players like Pascal maxes, and I would say even players lesser than Pascal have gotten max deals. So that is what he's worth. If you want to make the argument of like what he's worth to a team and then what you value as a max player, that's a separate point, and like very much that's opinion. So like I'm not going to sit here and tell you, don't have your opinion. But yeah, I
mean, unless
kind
you're
of
going to
disagree.
calculate jersey sales and stuff like that, and like
Yeah,
figure
but
out, and
even
that gets
even that
complex.
even that I'm looking at it like he is like I saw what he did last year. I saw him be a viable number 2 in a playoff run and then get a lot better and basically fail at being a very good number 1, but that's fine because
So,
he's still, I think right now, a very, very, very good number 2, and that's worth a lot of money, and that's worth a lot to a team
and
because
it's
we've
also
seen
very
teams
difficult to find. It can be just as hard to find a number
100%.
2 as it is to find number 1. I just really
Because you
quickly
real quick,
wanted,
because you can shoehorn a number 1 into number 2 and it doesn't work because that's not the role that they're used to, and that falls apart a lot. We see that happen. But yeah, go ahead.
So sorry, I just really quickly, I looked up the salary cap numbers, and usually the salary cap has only dropped in general when there has been a disaster like the 2008 financial crisis or COVID,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point this out as an example. So in 2008, it was $58 million. It dipped down to $57 million and went back up to 58 and kind of rose kind of slowly from there, about 1% at a time. Even in 2013, it was $58.6 million. If you compare that to now, it's $136 million. Now, this is before the new TV deal comes in, which is going to again be 10 times. The cap could raise very easily to $200 million next year, or at least over the next couple years, for sure,
Oh,
even
it
with
will.
smoothing.
So
Yes.
actually, I'll pull up the salary cap figures because Spotrac has that calculated for the next few years. So like I randomly had Indiana's cap situation pulled up. So I'll share the screen on that once I get to the numbers. Where are we at? All right.
Yeah. Like, don't be surprised if Scotty Barnes on his next contract makes $50 million.
He's making
That's why I'm
stupid
saying,
money.
like, you know, like we can't be saying like this dude is worth this or this dude is worth
So
that. But yeah.
here it is, people. I'll try to zoom in as best I can while having the relevant information on the screen. Okay, so basically, important thing. This figure in bold is the cap number, and then this figure in bold here, and the second thing is the tax figure, right? And then they have it calculated for these years. So let me see if that's visible. It could be more visible, so I'll zoom in more. Okay.
That's good.
That's good. So you see the cap going up to 207 by 2028, and it's only going to continue to go beyond that.
And that's just approximations before they actually sign the TV deal, right? And the gambling and all that kind of stuff. So sorry I interrupted you earlier, but
No,
it's I think it's an
so
important
so
point.
you know what I think what this is though is that if you notice there's a beginning at 2024 25 there's a 10% jump going forward. So like 10% of 142 is like rough 14.2, so then you see that added, that's how they arrived at this number, and then they got 10% of this, that's how they arrived here. So this is approximating the 10% jumps as soon as those rules kick in. So this is the thing, as long as that excess of income does happen, these will be the numbers, right? And then this 10% of this will go up to that next figure. And like again, unless I think there's a major jump prior, so
Well,
unless this figure shoots up, this will be what it is.
so usually what they do is they calculate it based on that, and then they reconfigure it based on how the revenue goes. So that's why I'm saying like this is a safe guess, a very safe
Yeah.
guess. But
Yeah.
like it could easily, for example, instead of being next year 142, if revenue continues to rise, because like people were freaking out, they're like, oh, basketball is down because people were, you know, not realize it's COVID, and then people just got sick of things.
Yeah.
It could easily go 148, for example,
Yeah. It could
right?
be 148. And then the trickle down of the 10% increases from that point will continue, and these numbers will all be higher. So I do remember that that's how it worked up to this point, but I'm just assuming that with the 10% cap happening going forward, they'll do the same configuration, but I just think they'll always end up at the 10% jump because so much money is going to be entering sports as a whole, but specifically basketball. So you can look at these things, and actually for some of my videos I'll be doing in the future about like looking at long-term salary stuff, it's pretty helpful to get like to just know that the cap can only go up so much, and you can look at the actual numbers, and you can get a pretty good assessment of how things are going to go. Just real quick, also Mudbone, out of curiosity, you're a Rockets fan, right? I think you mentioned that during the Fred VanVleet live stream thing that I did earlier. But yeah, I wanted to ask that because obviously you're in here, Peter's in here, we've seen Jez in here, a bunch of people that I know from Sarcasm City, and then even just the occasional random fan that pulls up. There was was named Joe Wayne in an earlier stream, and then another Lakers fan. So all the people here that aren't Raptors fans, I will be doing streams that are basketball wide streams at some point. So make sure you guys are tuned in for that. That will be happening at some point. Um, I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it. It'll probably be its own recurring show, and people will be here depending on what the topics are, depending on the relevant teams that we talked about that week. But I will have larger basketball wide content on this show. Like just organically, I found a lot of fans of other teams have turned up here. I found a Pacers fan that's down to talk about the Pacers. So whatever team comes up, we'll have somebody to talk about things with. I'm looking for a Hawks fan if that trade inevitably happens for Pascal. But Yeah, NBA wide content will be coming to the channel. FIBA World Cup content will be happening towards the end of August. So lots of different things will be here. So if you're not necessarily a Raptors fan, make sure you're subscribing to the channel. Make sure you're liking the videos, um, because I will be here giving you content that's relevant to you at some point. Um, Kenyon, uh, we talked to a lot. I'm fairly happy wrapping up soon. If you have anything left to say, you can get that off your chest. But um, yeah.
No, no. Thank you for having me, and that's actually it. I'll actually head out early, but yeah, I think it was a good chat as always, and enjoy the rest of your stream, man.
100%, 100%. Thank you for being here. That's all for me as well. We've been here for 2 hours. I'll chop this stream up into smaller videos and put that out on the YouTube for the people that may have missed this and only want to tune into different segments. A lot of people joined at different points of the stream in the middle. So make sure if you missed some of the stuff at the beginning, you go back and check it out. It was an awesome stream. We talked about a lot of things, and I'll be live again tomorrow potentially, but if not, Wednesday or Thursday for sure. If you're subscribed to the channel, you won't miss it. And yeah, I'll see you guys around. Thanks for all the support.